as I hear silence descending upon the room. I assume that you've all shared with each other. Okay, let's jump right in. So let's start with a little bit of housekeeping. So I'm going to tell you how the day is going to go and the information I'm going to share with you. I'm going to spend the bulk of the day actually teaching you a system that was taught to me a long time ago by a really awesome mentor. I was always good at writing grants when I first started because I could always write pretty well, and that's part of writing grants, right? But this guy showed me about taking it up a notch and actually turning my grant writing process into a community engagement opportunity. Sounds really weird, right? How can grant writing be a community engagement opportunity? But I'm going to show you how to do that in a second, okay? So we're going to go on an adventure together today because I have never done this workshop with this many people, okay? I typically do this with like 10 staff people as part of the same organization. So I've tried my best to scale it up to where it'll work for all you. Also, I know that a lot of you come from really disparate types of organizations, right? I see big brothers, big sisters here. I know there are some small grassroots organizations here. And so I tried to gear the material so that it was as broad as possible. But here's the beautiful thing about what I'm going to share with you. The process is like an accordion, okay? It can be adapted to the size and complexity of the organization that you have, the size and the complexity of the proposals that you're writing and the grants that you're going after, okay? So that is one key principle I'd like to leave with you, because sometimes you come to these things and you hear some so-called expert who's telling you what to do and you think, oh, I gotta go back and I gotta do this exactly the way that guy said. No, as a matter of fact, this process I'm gonna show you has been modified through the years as I have used it, because people like you have learned it and they've come to me and said, that part didn't work really well for me. Right? So we modified it to do this. And then I said, well, that's a better practice than what I was doing, right? So this is designed specifically to have some principles that undergird your grant and proposal development processes, whether you're going after a $5,000 grant or a $5 million grant, whether you're bidding on a contract for something. Maybe some of you do fee-for-service types of things, right? And you're bidding on things. You can use this. The system I'm going to show you, I have used for things like a pretty standard $25,000 grant from the Pacific Life Foundation, right? That most of you would be familiar with, like a corporate foundation grant proposal, right? I also used it to bid and outbid 22 cities in the United States to win the U.S. Department of Energy's Solar Decathlon event, and $1 million that came with that. So for the Orange County Great Park. So it can be used in a lot of different settings. So I've tried to make it very adaptable for you all, okay? So I do encourage questions as we go through the day, okay? We have a short, compacted period of time. Some of you maybe have participated in like 3-day grant writing workshops and things like that, right? There are some topics I'm gonna deal with that literally you could pull it out and do an entire workshop on just that topic, okay? So what I want to do is encourage you to ask questions, because if I'm not being clear, I need you to let me know, okay? And I'll clarify things. Now, I will ask permission that if you are asking a question that I know I'm going to cover later, you'll give me permission just to tell you, hold that question, and we'll get to that in a second, right? And then we will leave time at the end for Q&A. I also want to let you know we're filming today, right? Nobody pick your nose. You might be on TV. I myself will try not to cuss today. Sometimes that's a difficult thing for me. But we're filming because we want you to be able to take this back. Because some of you, people who remain nameless, that guy back there, right? You might be thinking about other things, right? While I'm up here talking. Like, did I leave the iron on at home? Or did I leave the dog in the house? Something like that. You might have missed it. Well, we're going to videotape it. And we're going to provide that link to you so you can go back and read it or review it. Also, we want you to show it to your staff. So if you have other people that you'd like to see this, feel free, you can take that and do it. So there are also packets on your table, okay? I'll be referring to those throughout the presentation, but I will tell you this, we're gonna send those to you electronically as well after this, as well as the PowerPoint, okay? So some of these, as the gentleman back there mentioned, I've included so that you can use them as templates. I mean, free, just take it, steal it, have at it. So the work's already done for you. If that could be of help to you, feel free to modify it in a way that will work for your organization. I'll certainly explain what those materials are for as we go through the presentation. Let me see if I covered all the housekeeping stuff. Oh, survey. So at the end, I'd like to know if you got value out of this, because the chances are good that we might do this again. Okay, so I'm always looking to improve. One principle I've always worked under that I've found to be helpful to me is that in all of my processes, including the one I'm going to show you today, is I disinvest my ego, right? So I'm not the end all be all. I don't have it all dialed in until somebody showed me a better way. I didn't know this stuff either, right? So I want to know, am I giving you the information that's really going to be valuable to you? So please, at the end of this, give us your feedback. So when we're done, hopefully you will have changed your mindset about proposal development and grant writing. As a matter of fact, what I'm going to ask you to do at the outset is actually excise the term grant writing from your vocabulary. Just sweep it away for a while, okay? Grant writing to me, I think words and concepts are like people. They pick up baggage as they go through life, you know? And we all carry that stuff with us. Grant writing is one of those that I think needs to go away because of its implications. The implications of grant writing is that you are in a solitary room or at a cubicle all by yourself, tapping away, just filling in the fields, right, to get the thing done, thinking of whatever you can throw into that grant proposal so that you can, be successful with it. But I want you to kind of change your mindset, and I hope that at the end of this, that you walk away, even if you don't completely get every single step in the system and in the process, you walk away with some principles that will make you think about this stuff differently. Does that sound fair? All right, but let's start with maybe where you are currently, okay? The grants fire drill. See if any of this stuff sounds familiar to you. In a lot of organization, grants development is not a strategic, focused, organized activity. It's more like a fire drill, right? So I have found very few organizations that actually have policies and procedures in place to determine, for instance, how do you research grants, right? How do you decide which grants to go after, right? Should we go after this one? Should we go after that one? How do you decide which programs to actually seek grant funding for? Do you have policies and procedures about your approval process, right? Who can approve grants up to a certain amount, $25,000, $50,000? Who has to do that within your organization, right? So we're spending cycles on this kind of stuff. Every time a proposal comes down the pipeline that we have to get done, we're having to gear up these cycles instead of just establishing policies and procedures around these things. So I will say at the outset, I'm going to say this a couple of times throughout. You may come to the end of this workshop and you may decide, you know what, grants is just not a viable revenue strategy for our organization. You should have that conversation. We're going to do a workshop later about funding models and revenue and fundraising. Too often organizations just do spaghetti on the wall when it comes to revenue, right? Whatever will get money in the door. Chasing dollars is never a good idea, okay? It leads to mission drift, it leads to misalignment, it leads to inefficiencies. So you need to think long and hard as to whether or not grants is going to be either not a strategy for you at all, or something you do on an ad hoc basis when opportunities come along, or a central part of your revenue strategy and your funding model, okay? You need to determine what that is. Then, if it's going to be a central part of what it is that you're doing and the revenue you're bringing in, then you need to develop policies and procedures around these types of things. And I'm going to show you about that. I've actually included some of those in your packet, actually samples of policies and procedures. So, this fire drill, like, who's going to write this thing? Like, oh, geez, I mean, this opportunity comes and then if you don't have a grants manager or a grant writer on staff or you're not contracted with one, everybody's got to decide who's going to write it, right? There's been no thought put into having maybe a grants team that is doing this stuff or somebody who is assigned to these types of things, a real strategic approach to it. And that culminates in the, oh my God, it's due in a week, right? After you've gone through all the cycles of who's going to write this thing, what should we apply for? Does the executive director, did they approve of it? Have we talked to the program director? Do they need money for this or do they need money for that? Who's going to write it? No. And then all of a sudden the deadline's a week away and you're back to that person in the cubicle hammering away at your keyboard, right? And then what that culminates in is what I call the drive-by delivery of the grant. Before delivery was pretty much all electronic, I was a grant maker with United Way. So I've been on both sides of the fence, Okay, I have been a grant writer. I've written a ton of grants. I've also, though, been a grant maker. So I've developed RFPs, put them out on the street, I've developed review processes, and I've reviewed grants, and I have funded them, right? It used to be funny to sit at about 4:59 and 9:59 seconds, like at the doorway of United Way, and watch people running up to the door, like trying to slide their grant proposal right underneath at 5:02, because it was due at 5. The modern version of that is like frantically hitting the send key at 4:59 and 59 seconds, to get that thing in. Then immediately you hit the send key, and you're like, oh my God, I didn't put attachment C in it. Oh geez, I used revision 2 instead of revision 3, right? It shouldn't be like this. This is a really inefficient way to do this. Again, if it's going to be a central part of your revenue strategy, what you need is a different way and a different system. Now, one principle that I would like you to take away from this, and if you come next week to the strategic visioning session, you're going to hear me say this again. If you come to the funding model session, you're going to hear me say it again, because it is an abiding principle of the type of work we all do, okay? We're all do-gooders, right? And so we can't just isolate ourselves and work in a vacuum on things. We have to look for engagement opportunities. Proposal development for me, one of the underlying principles of it, and one of the underlying principles of running our types of organizations, is that the people and the process are more important than the product, right? That's why grant writing, I don't like that term. Grant writing is product fixated. Write a grant. Have you engaged the right people? The right people will get you content for your grant that will set it up above the others and get it funded. Are you talking to experts? Are you talking to other staff members? Are you talking to donors? Are you talking to board members? Are you looking at other people who have won similar types of grants? Right? If you take the right people and you channel them into the right process, writing the grant will be the least of your worries. That's really what I'm going to try to get you to today, okay? So, I said I wasn't going to cuss, but I'm going to say a dirty word in a second, okay? As I said, I love you people. You're my family. Nonprofit. I've been doing this for 30 years. I started in homeless services at a little grassroots organization. I worked on everything from healthcare to environmental issues. My client list right now is so weirdly awesome. It ranges from the Pacific Corral to the Bolsa Chica Conservancy, to the North Orange County Public Safety Task Force, to UCI Applied Innovation, their entrepreneurship and innovation center. Why I'm there, I have no idea. But I get to do all this cool stuff. And I know you people. You're good people. And you care about people, right? You're do-gooders. You're justice warriors. You're all those types of things, right? So here's the dirty word I'm going to share with you because I want you to start wrapping your brains around it. Grants are inherently competitive, okay? So writing them is not the goal. Winning them is the goal. I'm as collaborative as they come. I have done massive collaborative grant proposals. That means with that group I'm collaborating with to propose for the funding, we're super collaborative. But guess what we're doing? We're going to beat the snot out of all the other collaboratives that are going up against us for that money. Reserve all of that goodwill and that collaboration for other venues. If you want grants to be a central part of your revenue strategies, you got to wrap your head around the fact that you are competing. It is a red ocean environment. Okay? So I'm going to talk a little bit about that in a second because you got to think about what reviewers have to go through. I've been on that side of the fence. Everybody thinks, oh, it'd be great to give money away instead of just begging for it all the time. It's not as easy as you think, and they have a hard job. And so you need to start thinking about competition, but competing at that level is going to require a much better strategy, okay? So what I'm going to start with are a few tips before I get into the grant winning system. We're going to spend the bulk of the time later talking about actually that system. I just wanted to maybe give you some tips about some things that would help you prepare to be good at grants if you want that to be a central revenue strategy for you, okay? How do we measure our success, okay? We're going to do a workshop on evaluation. Laura from Cal State Fullerton and I are going to do that later, just on general evaluation, program evaluation, things like that. But your revenue strategies, no matter what they are, grants, individual giving, corporate, whatever it is, events, you should be calculating some of these things. So one of the things I don't know if some of you are doing this. Some of you may have sophisticated grants operations already. I know I've talked with some of you, and you're just getting started. You've never written grants before, right? So one thing you need to know, if you're just starting, set up your system to track this right out of the gate. If you're not doing this, you need to start doing it. What's your current grant win ratio? What's your catch rate? It sounds so simple. You know how many organizations I know that just don't do this at all? If you put 25 proposals out on the street last year, what percentage got funded? What percentage got rejected? And here's a little sub-tip to this one. The ones that got rejected, do you know why? Do you ask? Somebody gave me that tip a long time ago. I just figured, well, they said no, and then I'd move on to the next thing. Ask them. Now, there are some program officers at foundations that get a little sketchy about that kind of thing. For the most part, they like you. They want you to be successful. And so when you don't get, again, when you're rejected on a proposal, ask why you didn't get it. I learned this lesson early on in my career. When I was the executive director of the Orange County Homeless Issues Task Force, HUD consolidated all of their homeless programs into one big supernova. Some of you who work in homeless services are aware of the Continuum of Care Coalition now. Back then, there was no Continuum of Care. This is the thing that established the Continuum of Care. I got all excited about it. I was in my 20s, and I didn't realize, we're still living in a meritocracy. We can go after, Orange County can compete with New York and Chicago and LA and get this money here. So I focused on writing a good proposal. The county and the Homeless Issues Task Force worked together, submitted a proposal. I jazzed everybody up, and then we got rejected. And it was a big slap in the face for me. It was actually a pretty big public defeat for me. I had people going like, this young guy, what's he doing, But what I did was I went back, I talked to HUD, and I said, this was stellar work that we put together. How did we not get funded? And then I started calling some of the regions that got the funding. How did you guys get funded? What I started hearing over and over again was, oh, political support. Oh, our congressional members, they were really championing this. And I'm going like, at that time, we had B1 Bob Dornan, and we had Dana Rohrabacher was still here. We had people like that. We never interfaced with them because they really didn't support what we were doing. We had done none of that work. So what I did was contacted Marion Bergeson, who had founded the Homeless Issues Task Force, a state senator. She started talking to Christopher Cox, who was our congressman, one of our congressmen at the time. His office kind of got charged up about it. They involved Bob Dornan's office, of all folks. And then we actually started meeting with them, and the next year we applied again and incorporated all of their input, and they started championing for us. We got the single biggest allotment of federal homeless dollars in Orange County history. It established the Continuum of Care, which still goes today. $7.2 million then. With renewals, over $260 million has come into the county from that, simply because we took the time to go and ask, what did we do wrong? So you really need to do that. I want to stress that to you. So next thing that you need to do in terms of measuring your grant success, I think, is determine the cost of grant development versus the impact of the dollars. Okay? You should do this for all of your revenue generating strategies. A cost-benefit analysis, basically, right? So if you're doing events, right, are you going, all right, what's the impact of the dollars? What are those dollars doing for us? How much of those dollars are restricted? How much of those dollars are unrestricted? All that kind of stuff. And then how much are we spending on this? How many cycles? When you're calculating this, it's not as simple as, hey, we hired a grant writer, we pay them this much per year, and we get this much in grant dollars per year. It's not that simple. What about reporting on the grants, right? What about implementing them? What burdens have you placed on your program staff? Because of the grants you're going out and getting as the development person. That happens a lot, right? Are you calculating the time you're taking for your financial people, your controllers, your CFO, your treasurers, those types of folks, all of your program people in the development of your proposal, your executive director's time? You need to know that. In order to determine whether this is a viable strategy for you, this is the kind of stuff that you need to track. So I really encourage you to do that. And then this one. You're going to hear me talk about this in some other settings as well. Opportunity cost. Nonprofits, my family, are really good at doing what I call dragging dead bodies around. Oh, we started a golf tournament back in 1972, and it's named after a guy nobody even remembers anymore. But we've been doing the golf tournament ever since, right? Why do you still, what does the golf tournament do for you? Well, I don't know. Is there anything you could be doing other than the golf tournament if it's taking 6 months of FTE time for 3 people in your organization just to get staged the thing on an annual basis? Is there anything else you could be doing? Opportunity cost is that calculation. What else could we be doing that might give us a better benefit than what we're doing now and the resources we're allocating to this? So I really strongly encourage your organization to develop kind of an opportunity cost policy that all the things you're doing, you should do this with your programming, you should do it with all of your revenue generating strategies as well. So grants are no different. You need to determine. So to determine if grants are going to be a central part of your strategy, calculate the opportunity cost. Are there other things that might be more efficient? When you do that calculation, you might decide, you know what, a small giver program is going to be better for us than a grant. When I was the CEO of the Irvine Public Schools Foundation, after years of doing great with grants, like grants was my thing, I got there and I wanted to do grants. I wanted to implement the system I'm going to show you and do grants. You know, in the over 6 years I was there, I think we maybe submitted 10 grant proposals because it wasn't a viable option. We did this calculation and it wasn't. We had other opportunities. We raffled off a house and we had, you know, small and mid-level giver, you know, programs, things like that, which were much, and earned revenue, which were much more viable for us. So, let me tell you now, I'm going to start to shift gears a little bit to get into the system. I'm going to tell you now the origin story. I'm kind of a comic book nerd, so I like origin stories. Let me tell you the origin story of the grant winning system that I'm going to show you here. When I was at United Way, we were not just a grant making organization, we were a grant seeking organization as well. And so I was doing it the way I'd always done it. And at that time, United Way of America and Bank of America partnered nationally to develop a program to fund early childhood development programs for all the United Ways across the country. But it was a big national competition. So again, Orange County was going to take a pass because we never were successful in those competitions when we had to compete with Detroit and Chicago, right? So at that time, we had a board member and a major donor named Paula Mathis, wonderful, wonderful donor. And she and her husband, had started a company called Stephen Myers and Associates. Now, what they do is very interesting. If you are Boeing, or you are Northrop, or you are Rockwell, and you want a piece of NASA's space shuttle contract, you contract with SM&A, and they do the proposal development for you. Now, these guys are nuts. I mean, some of their staff have like 7 levels of security clearance because they've got, you go to their offices and the lobby's wallpapered with the covers of the proposals that they've won. $200 million for the space shuttle, $1.2 billion from the Department of Defense for Boeing for something. So she came and she said, I think we should go after this. I really believe in early childhood development. We've got to do some things here. What if I got the VP of our proposal development division to come and work with us on this grant, see if we could get it? I was like, yes, I'll take it. So a gentleman named John Montgomery very kindly came in, and he was the proposal manager on this thing. And he's the one who taught me the system that I adopted from that point forward in terms of proposal development. And so John, more than the system itself, again, the nuts and bolts of it, John really taught me some of the attributes and some of the principles to doing this type of a system and why it's successful, and I want to share those with you here. The first principle he hammered into me was being thorough in proposal development. Thorough. The body would say, cross every T, dot every I. Give the funder exactly what it is that they asked for. I can't tell you how many times at United Way, when I was a funder, I would get proposals in, I wrote the RFP. I know what I was asking for. And it feels like somebody just cut and pasted some pre-made type of thing, I don't know if they were rushed or whatever, and just jammed it in there. So I want to, if I'm the program officer reviewing this grant, what I want to see is my first cursory review is probably going to be flipping through to make sure everything is there. All the attachments I asked for, every section filled out. Is there an audit? Did I ask for one? It's in there. Also, don't give me a bunch of stuff I didn't ask for. That's a problem too. Here's my proposal, and here's brochures from the last 15 years of our organization. And here's a picture of my dog, and all of this other extraneous stuff that doesn't really matter that I did not ask for. The next one is that it reflects back the language of the funder. Let me tell you, when I wrote my RFPs that I put out on the street, I was really proud of them, man. I mean, I worked on those hard. We all worked on those at United Way. We send them out. We're proud of what we put in there. We did a lot of research on our end to make sure what we were asking for was really meeting needs in the community, right? You're going after the money. Stroke the ego a little bit. Regurgitate back to them. This is what John always said, regurgitate back to them their own language. If they see themselves in you, they're more likely to fund you. This was the key to everything for me, collaborative and engaging. Switch your process again from grant writing to actually engaging other people. Use it as an opportunity to bring other people, and that will help you develop better content, but it also do relationship building for you. And I'm not going to beat this, I'm going to talk about it a lot later, and we're actually going to do a little exercise later on this. Yours must stand out, okay? And what John would always say is, by any means necessary, you must make your proposal stand out. Within the regulations, within the guidelines that they have provided to you, you have to do something to elevate yours above everybody else. Now, if that's going to be including graphics, where instead you would have just put bullet points and data, you know, if that means anecdotes and stories that are going to illustrate what it is and what makes you so special and your program so special, you've got to make it stand out. This is where I'll tell you the upshot of the Bank of America United Way story. So not only did John help us with that and show us this new system, we got the biggest grant in the country. And the reason was we made our proposal stand out. They were passing our proposal around at United Way of America going, have you seen this? They were holding it up. They called us and told us, this is outstanding. This is the kind of stuff we were hoping we would get in, right? And there were just a few key things that we did. They loved the graphics that we included. We included a couple of really great stories that they loved. So sometimes you read proposals and it's boring, quite frankly. You know, it's like a technical writing exercise. Proofread, dear Lord. I'm serious about this. There have been times when I had 2 proposals, I had to start making cuts, right? Kind of when you're making cuts on a football team and you've got, you know, 2 linebackers, both of them who, you know, are hustling and everything else. You got to find some little differentiation. Why are you going to keep one guy over the other guy? Okay? Why am I going to move this one up the chain and why is this one going the round file? Well, there were times when I would sit there and go, I like both these programs. I got to find some way to differentiate them. Time to look for typos. Did they not include an attachment? Is the stuff not in the order that we asked for it? So you need to make sure. This is such an important part of the process, and it's why you need a good system that's going to allow you to build in the time to do this. You need to be the first in the door. And this was such a simple thing, but such a revelation to me. When I, again, was reviewing grant proposals, I was very proud of what I put out. I couldn't wait to get your proposals back in. I wanted to read them, right? So if you were the first one in the door, guess what? You got read. And you got read a lot more thoroughly than the other ones did. And if you're the first one in the door, guess who just set the bar for everybody else? And if you submitted according to the process I'm going to show you that John showed us, and it's as excellent as the one that we submitted that got us the biggest grant in the country to Bank of America, then trust me, it's going to get noticed, right? So really important that you get it first in the door. And then lastly, the principle is it's got to be a rip, roar, and read. I want to be a page turner. That's what John used to always say. You want them to be able to get the next thing. What are these guys doing? Your grant should tell a story of the future, right? If you fund this, if not for you, we wouldn't be able to do that. It should be goosebump inducing. I want my proposals. I will tell you, when we bid on the solar decathlon, the U.S. Department of Energy solar decathlon, this actually happened. We submitted our bid. We used the process I'm going to show you today. We submitted our bid. The U.S. Department of Energy loved what we submitted so much, they actually pulled the RFP off the street. And they revamped the RFP, and we think, they would never admit it, we think they revamped it to direct it to us. They revamped it and they included a bunch of stuff that we had proposed in their new RFP that they sent back out, and then eventually we got it. So that's what we wanted. We wanted to be like, they told us, and one of the things they told us is we enjoyed reading this. This was really great. So let's talk about the reviewer's perspective. So you've submitted, you're putting a proposal together. I don't know if any of you have ever heard of John Maeda or his book, Designing Leadership. if that sounds familiar to you. It's a great book, by the way. But John Maeda was asked one time, he's an artist, and he was asked one time to define design. What is design? And he had the most elegant response. It was, design is empathy. That's really an interesting perspective. If you've ever tried to put a toy together on Christmas Eve so that your kid can wake up in the morning and see the toy, and you're looking at the instructions and you're like, I can't make heads or tails of this. I can't even get it out of the packaging without severing off a finger. It's like that hard plastic packaging and everything. Design is empathy. It's true for grant writing, proposal development as well. There's a person on the other side that is receiving that, right? You need to draft something that is empathetic for that person. That person has a job. Their job is to review your proposal. Their job is to take all those proposals, winnow through, and elevate up to the decision makers in whatever organization they're representing, the very best ones, right? They want you to succeed. But here's their problem. They have a stack of proposals that are like this, and they have a stack of cash that is like this, right? So what you need to do for these folks, the empathetic approach to this, is you got to help them manage up. Deliver to them something that they can't wait to elevate up to the decision makers of the organization. In essence, you're handing them a success. It's really the mindset that you have to go into. And if you do this with these folks, they will be your friends. They will renew funding for you. They'll fund you forever. The first grant I ever got was from the Pacific Life Foundation. It was Pacific Mutual Foundation at the time. Bob Haskell, some of you might know Bob. Bob retired about, I think, 5 years ago. Longtime president of the Pacific Life Foundation. And 24 years old, I didn't know what I was doing. I called him out of the blue. He told me how to submit a grant application. I did it. And then over the years, he funded every single thing I ever did when I went to different organizations. Because Bob just knew, if Tim delivers something to me, I feel really good about taking that up to the decision makers, my review committee that ultimately makes the decisions on these things, right? That's what you need to do. Have the reviewer's perspective in mind. Now, which grants should you go for? Like, that's one thing that you run into, right? So one of the things that you have to decide as an organization is whether or not you're going to take a shotgun or a laser approach to grant writing and proposal development. Now, I would recommend that you default to a laser focus, right? Most of you, I'm guessing, don't have unlimited resources to allocate to this, right? So you're going to need to streamline what it is that you're doing. And so I would strongly recommend that you really think, as you're thinking through when I talked about policies and procedures, those types of things, that you also think through what types of grants are going to be good for your organization. Now, my caveat is, some of you might have missions that are so broad and so many different program service areas and things like that, and you may have resources to take more chances, right? Where you can throw more spaghetti on the wall and take more of a shotgun approach. That's okay if it works for you, but I think you need to really hone in on the types of grant opportunities that are going to be best for your organization. You need to think long and hard about that. Let's talk for a minute about curating leads. Again, I'm just trying to give you some tips here before we jump into you could do a whole workshop just on curating leads, right? Where do those come from? How do you find out about grant opportunities? People ask me that all the time. So here are some things that I have found to be successful, I've used before, and I found others using to be successful to curate leads. One is very simple. Find out who is funding your competition. Who's funding similar organizations adjacent to you regionally? And how do you find that out? Go read their annual reports. They can't wait to tout who's funding them, right? So go in and read. That's not poaching donors, right? I mean, that's just being smart. So go into the annual reports of organizations that do similar type of work to yours and figure out who's funding them. That'll give you a bunch of leads. Also, who has direct connection? And you got to kind of hopscotch a little bit sometimes to those connections. Donors, vendors, volunteers, board members, staff members, friends and family, all those types of things. All that helps. Also, when you're doing new program development, you should automatically be thinking about lead generation as part of the program development process, right? So the program development shouldn't just be, here's the gap that we need to meet. Here's our methodology, here's our logic model and our outcomes. It should also be, Where are the potential funding sources? In this way, if you are lucky enough to have development staff and program staff, your program and development staff need to have regular conversations and regular meetings to talk about those types of things. So in that way, it's a team sport, okay? Leads can come from anywhere. If you want it to be a team sport and grants are going to be central to your revenue strategy, talk about them at board meetings. Share your philosophy. What are the types of things you're looking at? You never know who has a connection to who. Talk about them at staff meetings. You have to put this stuff central if you want everybody to be on board and helping you generate this stuff. And being proactive beats being reactive. A lot of people's grants strategy is sitting waiting around for people to clue them into RFPs and grant opportunities, right? That's random acts of fundraising, okay? You need to flip that script and be proactive about it. Like, go out and search for these opportunities. Again, I come back to, if grants are going to be a central part, if it's going to be an ad hoc thing where you're just going to write some grants here and there, maybe you don't need to put that much effort into it. But if it's going to be central to you, you've got to build these systems and processes around it. So, one other tip I want to give you, it's something I've started doing more and more, and actually for about the last 10, 15 years, I've started doing it a lot. Oftentimes, opportunities come your way, and they don't come in the form of an RFP, a request for proposal. They don't come in the form of a grant application, right, or a formal process. Somebody knows somebody at a company, right? And they're like, we'd like to help you guys out a little bit, right? So you don't have any guidelines. So like the proposal development plan that I show you, and I'm going to show you how to break down an RFP in a few minutes. There's nothing for you to break down, right? You're just wondering what to do with that. What I have found is using idea statements, what I call idea statements, are a good kind of middle step. And let me give you an example of what I mean by an idea statement. Some years ago, before the Orange County Great Park lost $2 billion in redevelopment money, we were actually building stuff, and I was helping them out. And we were talking with Kaiser Permanente. They wanted to do something at the park that was sort of health related. But it didn't fit within their charitable giving guidelines. And so we kept having sort of what I called the endless cultivation loop conversations, where it was like we'd have a conversation, never really get to anything. So finally I said, you know what, how about this? How about if I draft up an idea statement? I'm going to give you 3 ideas, you know, no budget attached, no request attached, just to kind of see where their heads were at. And that's what kind of got things on the right track. They read that. What that does for me is that gives me data on the donor, right? Also, getting a soft no on an idea statement is a lot better than getting a hard no on a funding proposal, right? So the upshot of this was they actually liked one of the ideas. We modified it slightly, and we ended up with a $300,000 co-marketing arrangement with them for the Thrive Path at the Orange County Great Park. So idea statements are things that you can use externally with funders. It works, by the way, also with major individual givers. Oftentimes major givers, they don't have a formal grant process for you to go through, right? But you still maybe have to put something together to put in front of them, some kind of request. Idea statements are a great way to do that. Here's 3 options. It's non-threatening. I think these 3 things align with what you're interested in. We just did this recently at UCI Applied Innovation. We were talking with the Nicholas Endowment, and they had never funded applied innovation. They really didn't know what it was. And so we did 3 ideas, gave them an idea statement. One of the ideas was a student startup fund, basically providing micro grants to low-income student entrepreneurs so they can continue moving along the path to commercializing their ideas. And they loved that idea and gave us $50,000 for it. So that's the kind of thing that can help you. The other thing this can do for you is it can help you internally with your own organization. So sometimes, if you're the person in charge of grants, you really want to go after something for a certain thing, or maybe you found something that might seed a new program. That might be a heavy lift sometimes internally because people are afraid of change and everything. Idea statements can help you internally. Maybe that's something that you give to your executive director. Hey, here's this grant opportunity. I think we align with what they want to do. Here's 3 ideas about things that we can go after, right? Start you narrowing down your options. It also gets you thinking about it so that the writing of it becomes a lot easier. So the last tip before we get into the actual process I want to talk to you about is the dreaded invitation-only grant opportunity. Did anybody come across that? Okay. If you haven't, it typically happens like this. Somebody sends you a link, and they're like, this is perfect for you guys. Like the Kauffman Foundation is doing exactly what you guys are trying to do. And guess what? They'll fund like $2.5 million a year for this. And you're like, oh, it's a godsend. You get all excited, you click the link, you start going through, you're reading and you're, oh, this is perfectly aligned. Then you get, oh, it's invitation only. Yeah, you don't get to come to that party, right? Well, there are actually ways to get invited to that party. So I want to share some of those with you here. The first is playing the Kevin Bacon game. You guys know the Kevin Bacon game? It's the concept that in Hollywood, you can start with any actor, Winona Ryder, right? And within 6 degrees of separation, you can get to Kevin Bacon, okay? Winona Ryder was in Edward Scissorhands with Johnny Depp, who was in da-da-da-da-da-da-da, and eventually you get to Kevin Bacon within 6, goes. It's the same thing here. What I would encourage you to do is, again, if grants are going to be a central strategy for you, start relationship mapping. Right? When you're doing annual meetings with your board members, if you do individual service plans with your board members, things like that, include this. Who do you know? Here are the types of things we're thinking about doing. Do you know anybody here? If you've identified funding sources, take those to your board. Review that kind of stuff with your board. See who knows who knows who knows who. I have gotten invitations to apply because literally somebody golfed with somebody. It happens like that. And really all it takes to get an invitation is if somebody says, oh, hey, you know what, I heard about this organization. You guys are funding that kind of stuff, right? You should take a look at them. That's sometimes all it takes. But you got to be strategic in kind of mapping those relationships and getting to there. Now, another way you can get in the door for invitation only is through collaboration. Go and look at the invitation only opportunities. Who are they funding? Is there a way you can partner with those that they're already funding, right? Can you add value to something that is already being funded in there? And start making those contacts. I've done that before, if not, no harm, no foul, right? Now, another thing you can do is you can pay for the introduction, okay? So let me deal with consultants for a moment, if I can, okay? I am a consultant. I am a nonprofit consultant. I'm not a fundraising consultant. I just decided I didn't want to do that after raising money for over 20 years. I figured I could take a break. But there are some out there, and there are strategic grants consultants. Now, this is different than contracting with a grant writer. I really want to make that distinction, okay? There are people who are nothing but grant writers who try to market themselves to you, because I'm going to give you some straight talk here for a second, okay? Because I don't want you to spin your wheels on this and waste money. There are people who market themselves as if they have all these strategic relationships when really all they're going to do is shotgun as many grants out the door as they possibly can. And they're going to extract from you a retainer to do that work, okay? I truly do wish that there were more of these really excellent strategic grants folks that I could refer to. I am literally down to referring to one that I trust. And that's really sad to me. I won't tell you who it is now, but if you want to know, I'll tell you offline. Happy to do that. But there used to be more. And I think that the job of fundraising, the average stay for a development person in an organization is 2 years. It's such a grind, I think, for a lot of people. It's so difficult. And I think a lot of the people who are consultants, fundraising consultants, are frankly people who have failed at fundraising within organizations. And they hung a shingle, and then they come and ask you for money. So, if you go this route, make sure you're going with somebody reputable. But if you find somebody reputable, and I know the person I usually refer to, outstanding. These people already have relationships with Annenberg, with Keck, with Kresge, with Kellogg, with Gates, with these, and those foundations trust these consultants that if they bring them something, oh, well, that's a fundable thing. Literally, I know that about 90% of the proposals that the person I refer to, when she's engaged with somebody, they get funded. But you got to pay for it. That's the thing. And you may not have the resources to do it. You typically probably would need to budget, depending on the number of proposals you'd like them to get out the door, somewhere between like a $2,000 to $5,000 a month type of a thing if you want to pay for the introduction. But that is a way that you can do it and get invited to these kind of hard and impenetrable foundations. What's that?
You guys have to be a very good golfer.
Yeah. So, lastly, marketing. we're going to do a marketing workshop. I'm actually going to bring a marketing pro in here and who has a lot of nonprofit experience. I have tabbed him for a ton of pro bono work over the years, and Ryan Rikas, and we're going to do a marketing workshop for you. But in the context of grants, these invitation only, they're looking for you, actually. They're actually looking for groups that can help them achieve their goals, right? But they'll never find you if they can't find you. So, and when I say marketing, I don't just mean we have a website, and yeah, we have a Facebook page, and a typical post on our Facebook page gets about 2 likes. You know, we're pretty good with that. You know, I'm talking about what are you doing to be a thought leader in your space in a way that's aligned with the mission of these foundations, right? These invitation-only foundations. So if you find that what you are doing, if you're involved in youth violence prevention and you find a foundation, that's the stuff they fund, and it's invitation only, one way that you can get on their radar screen is to be a thought leader. How do you do that? Are you blogging about this? Are you writing editorials? Are you connecting with their social media and interacting with the things that they post, right? These are the types of things that you have to do to get on their radar screen. Are you speaking at conferences and workshops, things like that? They go to those things, right? I've had that happen. I've actually gotten invitations to fund because I was just on a panel and somebody came up to me and said, I'm interested in what you're doing, you know, and please let me know because we might be interested in funding, you know, what you're doing. But you got to put yourself out there, okay? You got to be intentional about it. Okay, so let's shift gears. Actually, let me stop right there for a second. Any clarifying questions on anything that I covered up to this point? Yeah, I mean, you would just have to be very strategic, you know, about that because it's not just money, right? It's time and cycles that you're spending on that kind of thing. There are very few places where the funders, like all the foundation funders, gather, you know, where you can get in front of them. We have the OC Funders Roundtable here. Some of you are familiar with them. Every once in a while, they'll do some things that are more public, but most of their stuff is pretty much just among their group, you know, and doesn't offer opportunities for you to come and present to that group. You know, things, you know, some of the networking is always good, right? Because you never know what can come out of it. But I would, before I started just willy-nilly networking with a bunch of things, I go back to what I say. I would get my philosophy in place first, and I would get my expectation. What do I want out of these things? I wouldn't go to anything that's a networking event unless I had some clear objectives as to what I wanted to get out of that. You know, so certainly can help, but in terms of grant leads, I don't know if anybody else has any suggestions, but I can't think of any where you'd have the critical mass of folks. Corporate grants, I mean, you have more opportunities there in Chamber of Commerce types of things, but corporate grants tend to be a lot smaller, you know, than the foundation grants. Also corporate grants, I always say this, there's no such thing as corporate fundraising. There's no such thing. Corporations don't do fundraising. They don't do philanthropy. They do marketing, right? Now, we all have the good taste to dress it up in philanthropic language for their benefit, right? And it certainly is beneficial to us, but typically the big dollars are not in the corporate philanthropy budgets and the corporate foundations. The big dollars in corporations are in the marketing department. Right, so if you can put proposals together for the marketing departments in corporations that show benefit, that's what we did on the Kaiser thing. That's why we got $300,000. Kaiser, some of you probably get money from Kaiser. Typically their grants are a lot smaller than that. Well, this wasn't a grant, this was a co-marketing arrangement, right? So I'm glad you asked that question because what the process that I'm gonna show you is really about proposal development, not about any one type of grant. So it could be putting together a proposal to a company for a co-marketing arrangement, cause marketing, things like that. Yeah, you can be opportunistic in that way, but it goes back to what I was saying. I mean, that's marketing for them. I mean, they have the need for positive impressions, and you know, we'll cover that a little bit more if you come back to the funding model and revenue, because I will talk about corporate fundraising because it's something that is a little bit of a snake pit for nonprofits sometimes, and I've seen nonprofits get taken advantage of with it a lot because companies want to do that. And they want to bank on your good name. They'd love for big brothers and big sisters to endorse what they do, but you got to make sure you understand your own brand value before you go sit at the table and negotiate these types of things with a company. And that's a really important part, and it's something that's not intuitive, I think, for a lot of nonprofit organizations. Any other questions? All right, so let's pivot now, and let's talk about the actual grant-winning system that the wonderful John Montgomery was so gracious in sharing with me. Now, I will tell you that after we worked with John, I went to him and I said, you know, this was great, and I learned a lot, but there were elements of it that I could tell were built for a $200 million space shuttle contract with 7 levels of security clearance and not a $250,000 nonprofit grant, right? So I asked him, would you work with me to maybe modify this into something that would be conducive more to a nonprofit setting? And John was very gracious, and he did that. So what I'm going to show you is really what John and I worked on those many years ago and that I've been using ever since. As I mentioned, and I want to repeat it, this process is like an accordion, okay? It's adaptable. So as I go through it, I don't want you to get mired down in, oh, I got to do every one of these steps, right? It depends on the complexity of the proposal. Now, I'll try to differentiate for you the things I believe are principles that no matter what should undergird the process. You should do every time, whether it's $5,000 or $5 million, and those things that you could probably contract or expand depending on the proposal itself. So the first thing is the grants team. If grants is going to be a central part, not just an ad hoc activity, a central part of your revenue strategies, I believe this is non-negotiable. I've never had it as part of a central strategy for me where I didn't appoint the grants team. Ding, ding, like you have the authority to vet opportunities and to manage our proposal development processes internally. So now, the grants team will look different depending on whether or not you actually have an internal dedicated resource for grants. Some of you, I know, are larger organizations and you have development staff, including probably grant writers. Let me see a show of hands. Who has a paid grant writer, grants manager, grants administrator on staff? About half. About half. Okay, that's about what I thought. So, for those of you who have that, the chair of your internal grants team, guess who that is? Your grants manager, right? Your grants administrator, your grant writer. You just appointed yourself a chair, okay? For those of you who don't have a dedicated resource, you need to appoint a grants manager and a grants manager lead. This could be a program person. It really needs to be somebody who is a good writer, because usually the grants manager is the person upon whom the actual writing, when you get to that point, falls, and someone with really good project management and organizational skills. That's really the key. Doing this for some of you younger organizations can be a good staff development opportunity, right? To train some people up, to give them the responsibility of actually shepherding something like this. And the grants team is a group of maybe 3 people, maybe 4 people, depends on the size of your organization and how central grants is to your revenue strategies. If it's like a big, huge operation and you're going to be pumping out, between 50 and 100 proposals a year or something like that, then it might be a larger group. But typically you want this to be a small, agile group because they're going to vet opportunities internally and they need to move quickly. Going back to what I said at the beginning, you don't want to be wasting a bunch of cycles. You want to make some decisions once so that you don't have to make them 1,000 times every time a new proposal opportunity comes down the pipeline. You want to have those decisions made. And you want to have systems and processes in place embodied in the grants team that they have authority to carry out. Okay? So establishing good policies and procedures for your grants team and a good process for them is a really good idea. So one of the things that you should establish for your grants team is a dollar amount authority. You should give to them, you are authorized to move forward without any additional approvals on grants of up to X amount of dollars. Now, you may establish that at $25,000, you might establish it at $10,000, you might establish it at $100,000. I don't know, that's up to your organization and what you're comfortable with. But the grants team can't get hung up in spending 2 weeks trying to get through everybody to give them approval, right? That's all time that could be spent on the stuff we're going to talk about later, which is content development, which is the most important thing. This stuff you need to squeeze down into as little time as possible, right? So give them the authority to make these decisions beforehand. The grants team is also responsible for vetting opportunities. So all that research stuff I was talking about, going and looking at other people's annual reports and figuring out what are the proper things, deciding if you're going to take a laser approach, what types of programs internally are you prioritizing for grant funding right now. This is all the kind of stuff that you want to appoint the grants team to do, is all that stuff. And again, you can put different types of people on the grants team. So whoever your lead is, if you want one of your financial people on as another member of it, really having someone deeply involved in program is a pretty good idea to have on there as well, because obviously that's what you're writing grants for, right? Not every grant can be just an organizational capacity building grant, unfortunately. That'd be great, but it doesn't work like that. So I included in your packets, actually, in the little kind of process sample, there's actually a grid at the top of it that shows you this authority at different dollar levels. Now, this one that I've included is actually from a large organization, like with about a $20 million budget, but I wanted you to see as large a one as you can because you can scale that for your organization. So it kind of establishes a grid where you can look in at different levels of grant, at different sizes of the grant, what the approval process needs to be in order to move forward. All right. So you've got your grants team in place. Now, we're going to kind of get into the nitty-gritty of the actual proposal development process. So one of the things that the grants team is responsible for is appointing a proposal manager for each and every proposal. $5,000 or $5 million, it doesn't matter. Someone is ultimately responsible for herding all the cats, gathering all the information, getting the content ready, making sure the attachments are all in there, making sure the proposal plan gets done, which I'll talk about in a second. All the aspects, somebody has to be accountable to that. And it's the grants team who appoints that. Now, if you have a dedicated grant writer or grants administrator, grants manager, typically that person is probably going to be the proposal manager on most of these. But you might decide, you know what, for this one, because it's so unique, and again, it might not be just a straight grant. Maybe it's a bid for business or something else that you're doing that's a little different. So it could be somebody else. I don't want you to think it only has to be the grant writer. It should be the most appropriate person. Now, the proposal manager develops a proposal plan. So again, what we've included for you, this, if you see this document, this is a sample proposal plan. This is actually one I did recently. I kind of pared it down a little bit because it was a little longer than this, but I just wanted you guys to have something you could use as a template. And again, I will provide it to you electronically so you can modify it for your own use. This is one that I did recently for a federal I-6 grant. An innovation grant through the federal government, the Department of Commerce. So I did this one because there were a bunch of technical submissions. I wanted you to see how that got broken out in the grant. But this is the product that the proposal manager is primarily responsible for preparing for your grant, is the proposal plan. So most of us, what we do is we get the RFP, right? We go into whatever website, to start, and we just start filling in fields. We just start writing. That's not the first step. Okay, this is the first step. And we're going to do an exercise in a second to kind of break this down. The proposal manager also gathers a proposal development team. Now that's different than the grants team. The grants team is a standing group. The proposal development team changes from proposal to proposal, right? So I've had proposal development teams that were 3 people, right? We needed somebody from finance, somebody from program, and me, the proposal manager, right? And that's all we needed because it was small, pretty self-contained, pretty easy. But I've had big collaborative proposals that I've done as well, where the grants team was like 12 people because we needed 2 people from our collaborative partners who are also applying. We needed a couple of people from program. We had somebody who was helping us with evaluation on it. These types of things. Again, the accordion, right? It just, the grants team needs to be whoever will add value to the proposal, plain and simple. That's the mindset that you need to have. And it is the proposal manager's responsibility to establish all deadlines and assign responsibilities, okay? So you can see, as you sort of look at this again, it sort of builds across the page, okay? So what I've included in there is, here's the proposal element or the section. So project narrative. And then who's got the content responsibility for that? Usually that's going to be the proposal manager, but it could be other people as well. And then I break out, I'm going to show you how to do this in a second, I break out the section content, and then I have key questions to be addressed. But then this last section here, key dependencies. Okay, that's who do I have to rely on in order for this thing to be excellent? And that's who needs to be included there. So they're the proposal manager makes sure all those people in key dependencies, what you don't want to do is surprise them. Like 2 weeks before the grant's due, oh, by the way, I need a logic model for, what you need to do is build that in the proposal plan and then let them know, hey, in about 2 weeks, can you start preparing? Because in about 2 weeks, I'm going to come to you because I'm going to need this, right? That's how you prepare and you don't waste cycles on it. And their job, the proposal manager's job, is to report and review progress. So some grants are so important, right, that the higher ups in the organization are very interested in the progress on them. So it's very important to manage up on these things. Also manage across the organization and communicate across the organization. So this is also what fosters this culture of the team sport internally. So that responds a little bit to your question, is that somebody with the responsibility to make sure that they're just delivering information. Hey, we're about 3/4 of the way done with this. Just want to let everybody know we're working on this right now. We're about ready to move into our pink team. I know a lot of you are already tabbed to serve on that pink team. Just want to let you know. Or we ran into this issue, we got a roadblock here, so we need a decision made as to whether or not we want to include this in the grant. It's the proposal manager's responsibility to take input from the team and then manage across the organization and up the organization. So, the proposal development plan. Okay, so back to this. The term John used, I don't know why I liked it, I just did, is because it resonated with me, chunks. He's like, every proposal, every RFP, all grant requirements can be segmented out into digestible chunks, right? Sometimes you look at like an RFP and it just seems so impenetrable. They're asking for so much information, right? Your job as a proposal manager is to learn to dig into that stuff, but not just the RFP itself. It's to gather all the information that's going to provide for you the best possible content for your proposal. Now that includes, obviously, the RFP and pulling out as in as small chunks as possible. That's where you see the section content here. What I have done is I have dug into the I-6 and I have pulled out. I got no more than 10 pages, no less than 0.5 margins. I want that all in one place. Again, this is just efficient for me, so when it comes time to actually do the writing of it, I'm not searching through it going, what was the margin on it? What's the font that they required? All that kind of stuff. I got it all right here. Just pull this up, and I got it right in front of me. Okay? Just an efficient way to manage this stuff in as digestible chunks that you can possibly get. But if you look at this, if you actually saw the I-6 RFP, there would be things that are in this section that aren't necessarily in the RFP. Why? Because what I also did was I scoured the website. I looked at everything I could possibly look at related to this opportunity. I looked at who was funded before. In this case, I actually was able to find successful proposals. They post them, right? So I went on and I read them. We're gearing up right now at UCI to do a big, huge certification process for UCI with the Association of Public and Land Grant Universities. It's a campus-wide thing, a really difficult designation to get, and a really involved process. Well, guess what I was able to do kind of doing this process? UC Davis already got the designation. Guess what they did? They sent to me their winning proposal. Well, talk about squashing the learning curve for me, right? I was able to pull graciously they did that, for me, because we really weren't competing on it. I also looked at FAQs, right, if those are posted. And let me tell you this, if they ever do a webinar, or if they ever do a conference call, or if they ever do a grant workshop, an RFP workshop, go to those. So many times we would do that at United Way, and then I would see the proposals that came in, and I knew the people who didn't even come to any of that kind of stuff, didn't really, care to look deeper on it. They just, a week before, started filling in the fields and then sent it in, right? We're about winning. This is how you win. Okay, so do all this work at the front end. And again, like I said at the beginning, writing the grant after you do this kind of work becomes, that's the easy part. This is the stuff that will get you all the content that will help you win the grant thing. So All of that, the proposal development plan, your grants team, you finally, you've decided you're going to go forward with this proposal. You got a proposal manager. They've put together the grants proposal plan. They've chunked it out into small chunks. They've determined what are the issues that need to be addressed. What are the questions we need to answer? What's the content that we need to start delivering? You got your key dependencies, the people we need to rely on who are going to get us that information. Okay? And what you've done is you've started the process, and the deliverable that you are now shooting for is what we call the pink team draft. Okay? To me, this was the central component of this entire system that John taught to me. I never thought about doing this before. Before I learned the whole pink team process, I'm going to show you in a second, I would talk to other people while I was doing grants development. I'd need information on something, so I do a quick phone call. Hey, can you tell me when I call the financial people? I need to do this. Can you help me with the budget? Things like that. What John showed me was this system and this is the part where you really can transform grant writing into a community engagement activity and actually use it to build some affinity with important people in your organization, while at the same time developing killer content and really enhancing the content of your grant. So what is a pink team draft? So taking from your proposal plan, which is a working document, what you're shooting for is a bullet point draft, okay? And the elements in your pink team draft usually leave off like the budget or the attachments that aren't relevant, unless the attachments are very content heavy. But if the attachments like your audited financial statements, that's not gonna be part of your pink team draft, okay? Your pink team is a one-time group of people that you're bringing together. And it needs to be whoever you deem necessary. This is one of those things where I've done pink teams for review that were, 3 people. I've done pink teams that were 35 people, right, all in the room. Key thing for a pink team, though, is they all need to be physically in the room. This is not something you can do through teleconference. It's not something you can do, unfortunately, holding up the FaceTime, and walking the wall. So, and you're going to see why in just a second. So the pink team draft, you see up on the walls here, I've actually included a sample pink team draft that I've drafted up for you. Bullet points only, no narrative. What you don't want your pink team reviewers to be mired down in is trying to proofread your document and things like that. This is a content review. That's really what you're shooting for with the pink team draft. And so the program or the proposal manager assembles all the elements from the team. So when you broke apart your grant, you might have established in your key dependencies some people who needed to give you information on, outcomes or logic models, information on the programs themselves, stories and anecdotes, things like that. You might have farmed that out to other people. The proposal manager gathers all that stuff and creates the pink team draft, the bullet point draft. Now, here's the cool thing about the pink team. I have used the pink team as a fund development strategy. I have invited donors to serve on my pink team. Everybody talks about engagement all the time. We gotta be better with board engagement. We gotta be better with staff engagement, volunteer engagement, community engagement. People love to be asked for advice, right? What's the old saw in fundraising? If you ask for money, you get advice. If you ask for advice, you get money. You're going to ask for advice. This is a great way to ask for advice. Hey, can you give me an hour and a half or 2 hours of your time? We're working on this incredible funding proposal, that we think will transform our organization or this program that we're working on. I know you're an expert in that field. I know you've done research. You're a UCI professor, a Cal State Fullerton professor, and you've done this stuff. I know you're an evaluation expert, right? You're one of our consultants who does this for us, or you're a volunteer who works on this program and has a sort of a ground level view of this. These are the types of people that you want to bring in to the pink team to do what's called walking the wall, okay? Walking the wall, you've assembled your pink team. You've given them instructions. They're not to proofread, right? What you want from them is you want to get out of their hearts and heads all the things that will improve your proposal. So imagine what you're going to leverage here, right? Me sitting alone all by myself, out of my head, just trying to divine all that stuff. I'm going to leverage like 20 people in a room who come with all this incredible. I have never done a pink team. I have done dozens of these. Never done a pink team where I did not come away with at least 5 gems. Like a store, somebody said, oh, you know what? You're using data that's like 10 years old here. There was a study that was recently done by Michigan State University that actually it proves 100% what you're trying to do here. Here it is, right? So what you're asking your pink team to do is walk the wall. You're asking them to go up and take a look at what you have put here. You give them all Post-it notes. You guys have them on your table there. And you're asking them just to read your bullet points, to look at your content, the things that you are considering putting in your proposal, and to offer their opinions about them. So what they might do is look and go, okay, I see here under the goals, one of them is secure legislation that provides CEQA waivers for motel and abandoned retail center conversions to permanent supportive housing. Were you aware that there's an organization that already did this in, Fresno? And write that down and then put it right there, right? So what you end up with is you end up with a ton of ideas from other people that are outside of your own purview. And that's the stuff that you take and that you can incorporate into the rest of your proposal. So what I'm going to do, instead of talking about it, I'm going to have you do it. You're going to be my pink team today. Stay in dialogue. I always tell my pink team, this isn't something where you're just staring at there. What I love is when I see groups of people start getting around and going, hey, what do you think about this? I don't think that's the right way to go with this. I think that there's some better way to do this. Oh yeah, what we want to see is interaction. But I hope you saw what kind of a dynamic process that could be. Imagine now if this was your proposal that you were really keen on, that you really thought could help transform your organization, give you the resources you needed, and that all those people that were up there were people who cared about what you do and brought perspectives, and we were just chatting over here, sometimes, all the voices in our own head agree with us all the time, right? That's a great thing. So it's wonderful to live inside that bubble, right? I actually encourage my pink teams to be brutal. I actually tell them, be brutal. If you're reading something I'm thinking of including in this and you're like, yeah, don't do it. That is the wrong way to go with this. Tell me. I would like to have that perspective now rather than on the next draft, okay? So the next draft is what I want to talk about next. The next draft, after walking the wall, is what we call the red team draft, okay? So what do I do with all this stuff? If I'm the proposal manager, I take all this stuff, I sift through everything, and by the way, you're gonna get some clunkers as well. You're gonna get some stuff that's just not relevant to you, right? So here's the simple approach that I kind of take as I evaluate all of the comments from the pink team. I either put them in one of three categories, okay? Category one is no. This isn't going in, it's a dumb idea, it's illegal, I'm not gonna do it, out, right? So that's easy, that's the first cursory review. The second thing is kind of the opposite of that. I call these duh ideas, like, oh, why did I think of that? Like, good Lord, I should have been doing that. That's how we should be talking about the organization all along, right? So you get some of those as well. Then there's a third category that I call yes, but, right? Yes, but it might be illegal. Yes, but I'm not sure if that's how we want to talk about it. Yes, but I think that information might be incorrect. I need to do a little bit more searching on it. So don't just pull this stuff off and go, hey, bonanza, I got a bunch of stuff to throw into my proposal. You got to pull it off and kind of subject it to that type of an analysis, okay? And then your next destination is what we call the red team draft, okay? Red team draft, in essence, very simply is the draft. If you were submitting it today, this is the draft you would submit. Everything included, the budget, the attachments, the cover letter, everything, right? That's the next thing that you're shooting for is a red team draft. Now, I want to make this clear. There aren't only two drafts of your proposal that you're writing, a pink team and a red team. There's going to be a bunch of iterations as you are actually going through the process of writing the proposal, right? I mean, you might end up with 12 drafts, okay? But the pink team draft is a very specific thing with bullet points. The red team draft, not bullet points, exactly how you want this thing to look. Now, you're going to assemble another team of people, the red team review. Now, who's on the red team? For the red team, what I typically try to do is have it smaller. I've never had more than about 10 people on a red team. In fact, 10 people is probably unwieldy. I would say somewhere between 5 and 8 people on your red team. And who would I choose for my red team? I try to elevate that up a notch. Do you have a major donor that you are trying to cultivate? I have put them on the red team. What a sneaky way to get a major donor to sit and read about your organization. If you sent them a brochure, they're not going to read it, right? But if you ask them, you know what, I know you really care about these things. I just need you to take a look at this. We're applying for this thing. I think you could have some really good input. Would you take an hour and a half of your time just to come and review this, for us? Again, get them in the same room though. This isn't like I'm sending it out to everybody, please review it and give me your comments. You want that dialogue that happens when people get in the room. This is one though where, as opposed to walking the wall, you can have people on a conference call, right? As long as you provided the materials to them and they can participate in that way as well. Okay? But there's a couple of key differences. I mentioned this is your best effort. One of the key differences between pink team and red team though is I've included in your packets a very, very simple red team comment card. Okay? These are things you can print out, and what the instructions you need to give your red team is that there is no comment without a specific correction or recommendation. So in the pink team, somebody could just go, this data is incorrect. They could do that on a pink team. For a red team, that's not what you want. Now you want to make sure that you let your red team know that they're not proofreading. You don't want to take these important people's cycles going, there should be an apostrophe here, and the period's in the wrong place. That's not what you want them to do. Assure them that there will be a thorough proofreading. I'm going to show you how to do proofreading in just a second, right? In a moment. That what they're doing is a content review, and what you want to know from them, was this a rip, roar, and read? Like, was it a page turner? Did you enjoy reading this? What was it about it that stood out to you? But if they have specific comments, it can't be something like, this data is incorrect. What they need to do is say to you, this data is incorrect. You can find the correct data in a study that was put out by MIT last year, da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Or actually give you wording. Tell your red team that you'd like them to reword something that they don't like. We don't think this is the most powerful way to say this, right? Here's how I would reword it. That's what you want from your red team. Okay? So I have included other foundation program officers on my red team before. You guys know Orange County Community Foundation, right? You know, Todd Hansen's done red teams for me before. How awesome to have somebody from the Community Foundation learn about your program because they have access to all of these other funders, right? So Todd can read that and he can give me some great feedback, and then he can go, and as he's talking to people, go, you know, I heard about a program that Tim's doing over here. You guys might want to take a look at to other funders. So you want to involve really important people, real high-level volunteers, board members. Again, this is another engagement activity. So the final draft after your red team. You take all of the comments that you got from your red team, and now you're going to incorporate them into your final draft. So your proposal manager gathers all the attachments, gathers all of that information, packages up, again, back to our principles, exactly the way the funder has requested, exactly to the T. And then proofreading. Here's the policy I have for proofreading proposals in all organizations I've ever run and the proposals I do now. 2 people besides the proposal manager review it with a fine-tooth comb. Choose 2 people and already assign them as an ad hoc responsibility. Do you have a couple of people? Marketing people are really good at this, by the way. They're usually really good writers. They're very thorough when it comes to writing. Do you have some people in your organization that are just really good writers, right? A little professional development opportunity maybe for some of your younger staffers who could serve as proofreaders on grants. They're not giving you content. They are literally looking to say, Section A was supposed to be included right here. Is Section A right here? I am reading this sentence. Is it grammatically correct? Are the periods and the apostrophes and the commas, everything in the right place? Fine-tooth comb. The goal is 0 mistakes. No unforced errors. You don't want a single thing to detract from the awesome content that you got from your pink team folks and that you incorporated into this elevated proposal that you are submitting. And then you need to make sure that when you're putting your timeline together that you account for internal review and approval, okay? Some of you are small grassroots organizations and the internal approval process is like this. Hey, do you want to submit it? Yeah, go ahead and put it in. And then you're done, right? I suppose that Big Brothers Big Sisters probably doesn't work like that, right? You guys have a large organization, some of the Boys and Girls Clubs. I mean, some of the larger organizations, there may be approval processes. Remember, if you've put good policies and procedures in place, you'll know what those approval processes are already. So you don't have to gin them up every time. You just know that, hey, we're going to set our final draft 2 weeks before it's actually due so that we can send it up because your folks will have some internal comments. This is the last time they get to comment. So if your executive director or CEO needs to approve it, if your CFO, controller, whatever needs to approve it, you need to build that into your process. I will tell you, I do a lot of grants development with UCI, and we have to, whenever we're doing any kind of proposal development, I have to build into my proposal plans like 3 weeks to 4 weeks ahead of time because of the bureaucratic process internally to just get approvals, for grants. And you are really up against the wall if you miss that, and then you're trying to get this thing submitted on time. So, and here's the deal. This is what John hammered. 1 week early. The deadline for your proposal is not the deadline for the grant. The deadline for your proposal is 1 week earlier than the deadline for the grant. That ensures that you're going to be the first one in the door. Nobody else is going to be submitting a week in advance. I guarantee it, right? Except for unless you're competing with other people in this room now, right? So 1 week in advance, that's going to get them to read your proposal, and that's going to set the standard for everybody else. Every time I've done this, it has yielded good benefits. Sometimes I get like a call from the person, hey, wow, I got your proposal today. Like surprised, oh, we got, well, look at you, all professional and stuff, putting something in a week in advance, because they're used to the drive-by, out the window. So 1 week early, and then we're done. Our proposal's in. The money's coming, right? We're done. Nope. So a couple of things that you need to be cognizant of after you've submitted your proposal, okay, during the rest of the process. First of all, distribute copies to people who helped you internally, right? How about the people who served on your pink team and your red team? Hey, wanted you to just see how great this turned out, and when you distribute it, if you can, as a relationship building opportunity, let them know specifically what they added, right? So, hey, Joan, I really appreciate you coming and serving on the red team. That comment that you made about this, gosh, that made us think about this in a completely different way, and I think it really improved that section, so I hope you'll read, this. Take the time to do that kind of stuff. That's what builds relationships with these really important people. Also, if you do that, then they're more likely to serve on future pink and red teams for you and all that kind of stuff. And then setting up your tracking, okay? So back to the beginning, I talked a little bit about the measurements, those things. Tracking, a grant tracking system, again, if you're going to be submitting a lot of proposals, it's very important that you have something. I'm not going to tell you how to do that because everybody wants to do it in different ways. But you got to figure out some way so that A, you take a hit by the bus mentality, for this stuff. So somebody may come and you might be the grants developer for your organization, and you might get a great job at a different organization. Somebody's got to sit in your seat, right? It'd be good to know the history, like what was submitted in the last 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, right? Also the things that we were rejected on with maybe a little note as to why after you went through that process. So these types of things, you need to set up a grant tracking process. It's also a way for people to dip in there if they just want to know, people higher up in the organization, just want to see what's going on. It's a way for you to report and manage up when you're meeting with your supervisor, you're meeting with your executive director, you're providing information to the board, all of those types of things. So very important that every time you have a proposal, goes into whatever tracking system that you're using. And then lastly, thank your people. I still like handwritten thank you notes. I still do. I used to have when I was running organizations, I had a policy that every single person once a year got a handwritten thank you note, whether they gave me $5 or $5 million from somebody in the organization. We would do what we called our attitude of gratitude days, where we would just set aside a conference room. We had our development people or whoever was in charge of the database get all of the donors that we had in the previous year, and then people would just come in throughout the day. We'd have snacks, and we'd have board members come in and write thank you notes from their perspective. Somebody from the marketing department just, hey, thank you for your contribution. I work in marketing. What I do is try to get the word out about the good work we're doing, and your contribution really helped me do that. When I have done this, I have actually had people send me that thank you card back with an additional donation. Like they're so like, oh, wow, somebody took the time. It's such a small thing, but it's things like this that matter. People gave you their time when they came and they served on the pink team. The people internally who gave you really good information that served on your proposal team, right? They all took their time and their good thinking, and they did that for you. People on your red team, thank them. Send them the proposal and give them a nice big thank you for what they've done. And then one thing, part of a mindset, renewal starts with submission. Okay? The minute I submit something, I submit a proposal, what am I thinking about next? How do I get this renewed, right? How can I build this relationship? How can I keep this going with this particular funder? What can I do? So grant reporting, again, an entire workshop could be done on grant reporting. And it's the big bugaboo. And it's the thing that a lot of organizations don't think of when they're just shotgunning grants out there. I have seen organizations that are persona non grata. They can no longer apply to certain funders because all they've done is chase the money, and then they had no capacity to actually implement the program, and they've been banned by big funders forever, from pursuing. And I mean, I know several of those types of situations. So immediately when you're done, grant turnaround times aren't that long, right? Usually once you submit a proposal, you're going to know within a couple of months probably if you got that grant. It's very rare that it drags on beyond that. Anticipate your success, and you should put some thought immediately into how you're going to set up a structure for reporting on that particular grant, because every grant's different, as you know. Some want a quarterly report that includes these things. Some want a monthly report with these things. Some just an annual report with these things. Well, go ahead and just set that up, and in your tracking system you can make notes of that. So that's something that you need to think about, and that will help you be a good steward of those funds, which will help you with renewal. Then another thing I want to mention is communication. When I was a grant maker, a frustration for me was when we'd be like a year and a half into a 3-year grant with somebody, or we'd be 2.5 years into a 3-year grant with somebody, and they'd come to us and go, we're not going to meet our, we're not going to be able to meet our objectives. We're not going to be able to accomplish what we said we're going to accomplish. And there was all this stuff that happened for the last 2.5 years, and nothing was communicated to the funder about that. They want you to succeed. They're your partners. Their jobs depend on you succeeding. You know how bad it looks for program officers who fund your organization? If you come back again and go, that money you gave us, we're not going to be able to do what we said we were going to do. Draw them in. I loved it when I was at United Way, when somebody proactively would go, hey, just want to let you know we're having some struggles with this. We thought that this was what was going to happen. But instead we hit these roadblocks, we hit these challenges. You know what I would do? I would go, how can we help you? Let's work on this together. What do you think you need to do? I would even let organizations change the dollars, reallocate. What we want to do is reallocate these dollars we said we were going to use to hire this person. Instead, we'd like to use it over here for this purpose. Oh, okay. Well, that makes sense, right? They really aren't ogres. They want you to succeed. So be communicative with them, and that also helps build relationships. And then let's talk about relationship building. Okay, I treat program officers, particularly at private foundations, the people who are making the decisions and are the gatekeepers for whether or not you get the money, I treat them like major individual donors. That's how I cultivate them, as if they are individual donors. Okay, so I invite them to stuff, right? I put them on the list of things I think will be interesting to them. I don't bug them, but here's a concept I want to introduce to you that we'll talk about more when we do the funding model, revenue, and fundraising that was introduced to me a while back, and I thought it was just a brilliant concept. It's called the ask, don't ask ratio. Ask, don't ask ratio, okay? So we get into this mode where when people fund us, we just can't wait to ask them to fund us again, right? So we're looking for that next opportunity. But if we haven't built the relationship sufficiently, then that's not going to be successful. And no donor wants to feel used. No one wants to feel like they're only involved with the organization because they have a big wallet, right? So the ask, don't ask ratio is actually a way that you can systematize relationship building. So think about this. Let's say that you got a 3-year, $500,000 grant from the Annenberg Foundation, right? And that program officer really was your champion internally, and it was really great. And you want to continue building a relationship with her. An ask, don't ask ratio is thinking about, okay, the normal reporting, they're going to ask over 3 years, they're going to ask for a quarterly report, each year, right? So I know right there, I've got 4 times a year that I'm going to be in contact with them. Now what I'm going to do is think strategically, and I know I'm going to ask for renewal at the end of 3 years, right? So between now and that renewal time, I'm going to think strategically on the number of contacts I want with that donor before I ask them for money again. And then I got to be creative. I know already I got my quarterly reports, but I'm going to send them a note, about this. I'm going to send them a story. I'm going to tell them, hey, did you hear it? Let me tell you about Pedro. He was one of our toughest kids, and we didn't know if he was going to make it, but we did. I just wanted to let you know that your dollars directly impacted this. They love that stuff. You think they don't share that stuff internally to their bosses? That's the kind of stuff that they tell stories about when they're in their speaking engagements and all that kind of stuff. So that ask, don't ask ratio is a way where you can really make that strategic instead of just ad hoc, or sometimes what I call random acts of fundraising, right? Or random acts of stewardship, random acts of engagement. So we'll talk more about that in the other workshop. So that's as fast as I can talk. I know I fire hosed you with a lot of information. I really hope it was beneficial for you. Again, this is the first time I have done this with a group this large and diverse, so I tried to kind of gear it enough for the larger organizations and the more sophisticated operations and those of you who are just kind of getting started in this. So I hope it was beneficial for you. And I do want to say that I mean it when I say that I consider this group family. I mean, I grew up in the nonprofit world, and I didn't know anything what I was doing. I was 24 years old when I was put in charge of a nonprofit, and there was no Google at that time. I couldn't go, what is a nonprofit? How do I do this, you know? So everything, including grants. The way I got money from Bob Haskell, literally at Pacific Mutual, was I was driving around Fashion Island one day. I saw their building, and I thought, they look like they have money, and I looked them up in the phone book, and Bob actually answered my call. Like, that's how it all happened for me. So I try to be sympathetic for those of you who are just starting with this stuff. You can't know everything, and I don't know everything. So the surveys, if you would please take a few moments to fill that out. Let me know if this worked for you or what we can do to improve it. Really interested in knowing. Also, let me know what you liked too, because I can do more of that if there are things that were really, really helpful to you. And then let me see if there's anything else I needed to cover. I think just thank you. Appreciate it.